the plan for this is to be the second to last video where I don't know. I don't think the term shop talk is the right way to say it. More like movement talk. But I don't even like that term because what movement are we talking about? Alt-right movement? What? I'll just get into it. I kind of want to move on from this stuff. I don't want to be talking about Richard Spencer a whole bunch. Like, that's not what I'm here for. I'm not here to talk about Richard Spencer or Andrew Anglin or Weave, I'm not here to talk about these guys. I'm here to do my thing. Okay, I have my program. So I kind of want to get off of this, but I also, I don't know, I sort of feel like I have to talk about this stuff. The first thing to talk about is there was a comment in one of my videos talking about optics cucking. And I was thinking, imagine if during the 1960s, the anti-whites said like everything they openly supported. Like, what if they came out, supporting anti-white discrimination in universities, in government hiring, said we're going to try to get firms to discriminate against whites. We're going to, and we're going to label anybody who's opposed to anti-white discrimination. We're going to call them a hate group. Okay, we're going to try to associate them with Nazis. Okay, we're going to try to get, people who are against anti-white discrimination. We're going to try to get them fired. We're going to push an idea of quote unquote white privilege. Like, if they let all that out of the bag, and if they let people sort of go out and scream "fuck white people" back then, they would not have had they would not have had so much success, right? They would have had a much more difficult time of it. Even with the sympathetic media. I mean, there's sympathetic media, but like, A, it was probably a lot less sympathetic back then. And B, a story's a story. It only takes one media outlet to break it. And it's just, they engaged in what people on poll call optics cucking. And like, everyone does this. In an ideology, there's like stuff, there's a whole bunch of priors. Okay, there's a whole system of beliefs. And they all build on each other over time, and they build to a kind of conclusion that, had you known what the conclusion would be at the beginning of the process, you'd be horrified. Okay? That's kind of why, and so optics cucking is necessary because of that. So, but that said, trying to say no to Nazis and also no to something else, I'll talk about that in a little bit, it's not cucking in any way. Because first off, like, I'm sick of, like, I see kind of what Mike is doing. I see him as cucking to the Nazi types, cucking to the Stormer 1488er crew. I view him as cucking. These people are not helpful. Like, more importantly, like, Hitler was not a white nationalist. At most you could say he was a German nationalist. Okay, but remember, he thought that there was an Aryan strain in the Japanese and not in the Russians, right? So he was more sort of favorable to Japanese, view them as more of an Aryan warrior race than he thought of the Russians, right? And other Slavic peoples as having no Aryan strain within them. I mean, it's like he was not, he was, I guess, like you could point to some views that Hitler had that were like marginally pro-white, like he was pro-British Empire. He wasn't a fan of the French, but he wasn't. But like, that's very thin gruel compared to what the other people at the time believed, right? Compared to like common views on race in Britain, France, and the United States, Hitler was, Hitler was no more sort of white nationalist than them. In fact, probably a bit less so, because he was so obsessed with Germany in particular, right? And of course, we know the results of his regime was, mass killings of a whole bunch of Slavs. Now, look, people can go back and talk about Hitler and say, Hitler was massively lied about. I have some sort of unconventional views of the camps, for example. But like, ultimately, like this, but this is not white nationalism, okay? What does this have to do with the white country? What does this have to do with that? And it actually does have something to do with that, but in a negative way. Because what has happened, I don't know if this was some schemed, masterminded strategy, but what has happened is, like, a tactic is to link white identity with Hitler. And they succeeded. It's like, I'm not exactly certain how they did it, how they managed to link white identity with Hitler. Part of it had to do with, they would say, oh, here are the Aryan racial theories. That's racial thinking. Thinking about race leads to Hitler. I think it was sort of a vague thing that happened. I don't know if it was masterminded. Maybe some people were sort of pushing that narrative. However it happened, that's how it happened. Okay, and they've managed to sort of link Nazi to white. Okay, even though like Hitler killed millions of white people, so like if anybody should be anti-Hitler, it should be whites, right? More than anyone else. I mean, here's some like a little factoid to consider is that the Nazis didn't racially segregate blacks into their own units, whereas the United States did. Now, you could say what you want about that. You could say that that there weren't enough blacks in Germany to form their own units, or it wasn't big enough of a deal for them to go through the hassle to do that. Fine. Probably that's probably true, but just it's just a little factoid to keep in mind. Okay, that the Nazi regime was not focused on race as we conceive of it, and they were massive, and in effect they were massively anti-white. They had ideas of race that were fanciful. Prior to the war in the United States and in Britain, there were anthropological conventions filled with people who, by today's standards, would be called "quote unquote" race realists, denouncing the German racial thinking at the time. So it's not like the Nazi regime wasn't pro-white then, okay? At least not particularly. I mean, you could say that Hitler had some views, okay, but those weren't but so did Churchill. So did probably the Prime Minister of France. Roosevelt, who knows I think Roosevelt was a secret communist and had a whole lot of bad views, but publicly Roosevelt didn't say anything like that. Like the general white American public had good views on those things. So like there's nothing particularly white nationalist about Hitler. Like that's what's important to say. Like anything, Hitler being perhaps pro-British Empire, maybe pro-racial segregation in the United States, these were conventional views that all the other white people at the time had. Okay, so there's nothing particularly white nationalistic about Hitler. What is particular about Hitler is anti-Slavic. Right, and anti-Jew as well. Like the Hitler regime is not even a pro-white movement at the time. So that's the first problem. And the second problem, it's a regime of incredible odium that like our enemies have managed to link to white interests. Okay, they've managed to draw that link. And what is happening is you have idiots that I think fall for it. Right? It's just kind of a stupidity. They fall for it, and they think that you have to fight that fight for some reason. They think that you have to that white nationalism is Hitler, and you have to defend Hitler. I'm not quite exact, And look, I understand that the situation with Poland was not so clear cut. Okay. I understand the issue regarding the territories taken from World War I. I understand that Germany brought Poland into existence, and then at the Treaty of Versailles, Poland repaid Germany by taking a bunch of territory from Germany. I understand that. Okay? I understand what Poland did. I understand that Poland was an aggressor nation, right, to Lithuania, to Czechoslovakia. Okay, I know. Okay, I'm not. I'm not a History Channel bitch, okay? I also know about the death camps that they certainly existed because the Soviets tell us so, right? We know they must have existed. Now, the Western powers, they did investigations of all of the supposed death camps in the West, right? Found that the purported death camps in the West, which had all sorts of testimony, the gas chambers at Dachau, the torture facilities at Bergen-Belsen, right? Those were all found to be fake testimony, fake memory, or whatever it is they're doing, right? I mean, you can say testimony, but we know that all that was fake. But we know that all the death camps in the East were all real, right? Because the Soviets tell us so. Now, the Soviets did not allow any foreign observers to come in and investigate. That's true. But why would Stalin lie about something like that? I'm telling you, YouTube, Google, I'm not a Holocaust denier. The Soviets tell us that there are death camps, but all the death camps happen to be in the Soviet zone of occupation. You know, that must be true. That is true. Okay? Okay? So just keep that in mind. That's definitely true. It's real. It happened. It must have happened. The Soviets tell us so. The Soviets wouldn't lie. Like, why would the Soviets lie about Hitler? Do they have some sort of axe to grind against Hitler to want to make Hitler look bad? Come on. Like, let's get real here. Okay. But, whatever about Camp Auschwitz, like, it doesn't matter. Okay? Because the Nazis were still anti-white. They were still trying to kill... They were still sort of indifferent to the lives of Slavs, or at least certain kinds of Slavs, at least to Poles and Ukrainians and Russians. So that needs to go away. So they're not white nationalists, and they're used by our enemy to link us to something very odious, to something like, I'll say it, like they're evil, like the Hitler regime. They were bad dudes. They were bad guys. They were happy to start wars against other, like, there's all sorts of stuff that they're saying, like, you don't need the Holocaust, right? Like you could look at their own statements, like David Irving, when he's writing, like, David Irving is called like a Hitler supporter or Hitler sympathizer, but like when I read stuff about Hitler from David Irving, doesn't sound good to me. He's talking very casually about killing tens of thousands of people in war. For narrow political aim. Like, this is a bad guy. He's a bad guy. Okay, so that's enough about that. But that's kind of well established. I think most people, I think that horse is is dead at this point. But I also think that it's important not just to say, hey, don't have the swastika flags because it's bad optics, but also to say, don't have that because they're bad guys and they're anti-us. I think, and when you do that, that's better, because now you have a more sort of complete, you have better certainty. Because let's say you had sort of a policy of exclusion, which is where you could be sort of a Nazi in the background, just don't bring it to the events. It's like, you have that policy versus a zero tolerance policy, that you basically want to block out anyone who believes that stuff privately. And I see like zero reason to have anything other than a zero tolerance policy. Because think of it like this. Let's say there are only 10 bona fide Nazis. There are only 10 Hitlerites. Well, if there's only 10 of them, then there's no point. Then it's not worth it to have anything other than a zero tolerance policy, because you'll only be preventing 10 people from your rallies, right? Or 10 people from your events. Like, it's 10 people. Who cares? Okay? So there's no reason. So if it's only 10 people, then there's no reason to have anything other than a zero tolerance policy. It's not worth the complication or hassle of a more sophisticated policy. If it's 10,000 people, well, then you still definitely want a zero tolerance policy, because 10,000 people, that's a lot of people that may be worth something in rally and events and stuff. But like, with 10,000 people, it only takes one. It only takes one to show up at an event, get on a table and start waving, doing the Roman salute, waving the flag, waving the swastika flag. It only takes one. And if there's 10,000, it's almost a certainty that you're going to get one who's going to do that. Okay? I mean, I could see, for example, at like American Renaissance, I could see some guy get in there, with his suit and, pay the ticket, pay everything, get his suit in, and then, like, during that event, especially if there's like an old media camera back there, if there's like a CNN camera, he could like pull out a bit of kind of a handkerchief flag of like a swastika and like wave it up, and then if there's an old media camera in the background, they'll take a picture, they'll have the video recording, and that'll be the event. That'll be the American Renaissance event, and just one guy could do that, and that's it. And it sucks. It sucks. It shouldn't be this way. I totally agree. Like I agree. It should not be this way. The media should not be so dishonest to take one person's actions, but that's just the reality, and it needs to be blocked out. It needs to be kept out. Okay. But I also, and here's another thing. This is going to be a bit more difficult, or this is going to make a lot more people angry, is that Confederate imagery should be shunned and kept out. Obviously, it's nowhere near as bad, but it's still bad, okay? Moreover, the Confederacy is not, again, it's not white nationalism, okay? It's not white nationalism. It's the South, okay? And there's a whole bunch of neo-Confederates who are pro-Southern secession, and they're pro-black, in that they want blacks to be part of their, new Southern state, and they want to incorporate and integrate the blacks into the new South, okay? So now, fair enough, that the Confederate flag, there's sort of a relation, there's sort of an intersection between the Confederate flag and white identity, because there's a lot of people who are white nationalists for some reason also, like I don't know, like the Confederate, like was the old Confederacy a white nationalist state? Maybe, like I don't know, but they had a whole bunch of black slaves, so like historically, was it what, like it's not something I want to be associated with. I mean, I don't want to be associated with the slave state, historically. Now, I understand that people who wave the flag today, the Confederate flag today, that they don't support slavery. I get that, but a lot of normies don't get that. A lot of normies may think, oh, these people want to bring back slavery, It's not the stupidest thing in the world to think, given that it was a slaveholding regime. But then you're in there saying, no, it doesn't mean pro-slavery. That's in the past. It just means the South. But now what are you doing? Now you're in the weeds explaining what the Confederate battle flag means. That's what you're doing. And like, why are we doing this? Why are we wasting time explaining what the Confederate battle flag means to you versus what it meant in 1863? Why are we having this discussion? This isn't us. Okay, this flag, it's not our people. Okay. And Southerners, like, they're being kind of assholes when they do this, when they bring all their Confederate stuff on board. They're being kind of dicks. It's like because what they're doing, because like the Confederate battle flag, I mean, it's not the kind of kill shot that the swastika is, but it's very negative. It's very negative connotations to most people. Okay? It has very negative connotations. Now here's another thing. White identity has negative connotations to most people. Fair enough, but white identity, that's the point. That's the end goal. That is the end. That is the end in itself. Okay? So so that's not something that can be avoided. That's just like that's the end goal, right? Yes, white identity is when you say that to people, they're going to be kind of, what is that, and have vaguely negative ideas of what that is. Okay, I get it. That's obviously going to have negative connotations. Okay, but oh well, that's the situation we're in. That's the point. The point is the white nationalism. That's the goal. That's the end state. That's what we want. Okay. This Confederate stuff, this is some other battle that is not germane to the end state. Okay? Like, and in fact, you may be able to go so far as to say that Confederate identity has less odium than white identity. I don't know. I haven't seen surveys on that. It's possible. It's also certainly possible that it stands more chance to gain ground in the moment of interaction with another person, because you can say, oh, it's not racial. We support black Southerners being part of our country as well, and equal rights and all that stuff. So then people may go, oh, well, that actually sounds okay. So it may, like Southern nationalism may ultimately have a better shot than white nationalism. Like, maybe. I don't know. I'd have, that's it's certainly, there's a plausible case that it could be. There's also sort of a plausible case that it wouldn't be. Is that there's a lot of anti-Confederacy conditioning, given that it's a slave state and stuff. So yeah, I don't know. That's sort of an open question whether or not the Confederacy or being Confederate is more or less has more or less sort of a PR benefit than white identity. I don't know. Okay, but like it doesn't matter because the Confederacy is not the end state. It's just like you're adding on another problem, right? We are like the battle's hard enough with white identity, right? That's hard enough. Okay, why are we adding on Confederacy as well? Even people can say, sure, it's like let's say like white identity. It's like this like 1,000-pound stone that we're trying to drag up a mountain. Okay, and like and the Confederates come along with their 500-pound stone, which is the Confederacy. And they're trying to bring that up, and it's like, why are you trying to bring this up? Why are you trying to bring up another stone? We already have this 1,000-pound stone. It's really difficult to bring this up. We don't need to add your 500-pound stone as well. And then they respond by saying, well, I'll have you know, this stone isn't as heavy as white identity. It's like, well, okay, but we have to get the stone up. Like, this is the point. This is white identity is it. Okay, it's this or nothing. Right? You're not going to have freedom of speech in a multiracial country. You're not going to have a free economy where you can easily open businesses. You're not going to have like a middle class. Okay, you need whites for all this stuff. You need whites for all this nice stuff. Okay, so like you have to have like white identity is the end in itself. Southern nationalism is not. So, like Southern nationalism doesn't matter. Right? It don't matter. Okay, I mean, so, and I get. And it's difficult. It's a difficult sort of argument to make because Southerners are shit on, right? It's hard to sort of get this because it's they're shit on. The Confederacy's lied about. I know, but it's like, and so they want to, and so they see it as sort of, I guess, a liberation to sort of to be proud Southern Confederate, whatever. But that's not the point. I understand that there's a great injustice in how the South is portrayed, how whites in the South are portrayed. They're demonized and shat on in media and in politics. I get it. But like what battles are we fighting? Like what are we fighting for? Are we fighting for like what are we fighting for? Right? Like basically, I'm looking at the Confederate flag. I'm thinking, is it white nationalism? Does it help us advance? Okay, those are the questions you need to ask every time. Like, does it help us advance? Is it white nationalism? Does it help us advance? And the Nazi imagery is A, it's not white nationalism, and B, it definitely doesn't help us advance. Right? Like white identity is like 1,000-pound stone. The Nazi thing is like a 10,000-pound stone. Okay, and the Confederate thing, that may just be a 500-pound stone, but it's still another stone. Right, it's still another thing that you have to, you're playing into some conditioning. Now the conditioning is not anywhere nearly the anti-South, anti-Confederate conditioning, isn't nearly as extreme as the anti-Hitler conditioning. Right, it's nowhere near. So, but it's just not something we need to be dealing with. Okay, so that's enough about that's why like, and so yeah, so if you're doing either Nazi imagery or you're doing Confederate imagery, you need to ask yourself what is your goal here? What is the point of that? Is this just sort of like, and if it's just, oh, I want to express myself, well then you're being selfish, right? You're putting your own personal self-expression above your people, right? You're putting that first, right? You're putting the sort of the psychological benefit or the psychological satisfaction of being Confederate over and above what needs to be done to actually work. Call it optics, cucking, or whatever. Well, sure, cucking, but like I've made my point. I mean, do you want to go to these events and spend what do you want to do? Do you want to spend a whole bunch of time arguing about the South to people? Spend a whole bunch of time arguing about the ins and outs and all the weeds about Southern nationalism, what it is today versus what it was then, lies about what it was then, lies about the Civil War then, right? The battles of the historical record. Okay, it's just not worth it. It's just another stone to drag up. Okay, so now I want to talk about live events, and I think I'm kind of glad how this is shaken out. It seems that it seems sort of the common narrative that live events are bad. I hear people trying to analogize to other movements. It's like, well, I don't know. Like, I guess maybe like they had marches and stuff, but like I think this is sort of a cargo cult mentality. Like they're looking at stuff that was sort of kind of a culmination. Like marches are not are marches come after. Marches come after victory. Or not, maybe not victory, but they come after you've reached a certain level. Okay? But if you try to do marches before that level, you're just gonna get shat on. So because you don't control the post-event spin, right? That's what matters. That's what most people are actually going to see. What most people see is what the legacy media cameras show them. Okay, they turn on the TV, they see swastika, they see Confederate flags. Okay, which again, not as bad as swastika, but it's not good. Okay, so they see all this imagery. All right, then they have people saying, "Oh, violence at white nationalist rally," or better yet, white supremacist rally. Violence, white nationalist rally, Confederate battle flags, Nazi stuff. Thanks Heimbach. Thanks for supporting a genocidal anti-white dictator who wanted to kill or enslave or expel like all the Slavs. All Slavic peoples. Okay. Thanks Heimbach. That's real cool. It's real cool that you're promoting that stuff. All right? That anti-white maniac. So we know how that happens. And whenever you have a live event like talking to the media, it's like talking to cops, or like talking to an investigator who's trying to get you for like, don't talk to these people. Like when you talk, like they're out to indict you. Like that is their goal, right? When they start like looking around stuff for like a story, they've already written in sort of the framework of how the story is gonna go. Like they've written about like 80% of the story. All they need at that point, when they're interviewing people, all they need are people to say the things that they need to sort of fill in these certain slots, right? They need somebody to say, okay, you need the Hitler, you need the Confederacy, you need to hit a few certain points. There may be a few surprises. For example, Richard Spencer saying like, I'm willing to die for this. Right? That's kind of interesting and also sounds kind of crazy to a normie. Okay. So they'll put that in. So there's like a few surprises in the interviews. They'll say, "Oh, that's something that'll kind of freak normies out. Let's put that in." All right. So they'll. But broadly speaking, they already have the story written. By the time they're talking to you, the story has been written, and they just want you to dance like the monkey, do a few things. All right. So and they got that. They'll talk for you for 3 hours to fish for the quotes that they want. And eventually, over 3 hours, if you're just talking long enough, they'll get those quotes, pull those quotes. That's why they have multiple cameras, so that their editing doesn't look so hackneyed. If they only had one camera, there'd be all these jumps, right? And it would be very hard to dishonestly edit. But having multiple cameras allows them to dishonestly edit more easily and make you look like a fool. And I'm looking at that ABC thing, and I'm not mad at Richard Spencer for what he said in the interview. I'm mad at him for doing the interview. Okay, because it can't end well. These people are not your friends. It cannot end well for you. It cannot. Okay, It just, yeah. I think most people most people who aren't idiots, they understand this. If they're and if they don't understand this by now, they never will. I have a suspicion that Richard Spencer. Another thing Richard Spencer needs to sort of consider is that him being sort of the appointed leader by old media is he needs to keep doing that, because if he doesn't keep doing that, then he's going to fade into irrelevance. Like, if Richard Spencer doesn't, for example, if Richard Spencer doesn't have, say, all these live events, and if Richard Spencer doesn't have old media talking to him, then what distinguishes him from anyone else? He's not a particularly interesting speaker. I mean, for example, I was listening to that thing at Auburn, and and the event was titled like Richard Spencer's speech at Auburn or whatever. And there was one guy, I forgot his name. He was an old guy. His speech was kind of interesting. Was it Pac Dixon? I forget who he was. But there was him, but he was an interesting speaker. And then there was, of course, Mike Enoch. And Mike Enoch's always an interesting speaker. Then comes in Richard Spencer, and I'm listening to Richard, who's supposedly the main event, and I'm listening for like a few minutes, and I'm just like, 3-4 minutes later, I'm bored. I'm just bored. Like, Richard Spencer's saying a whole bunch of Richard Spencer things, and, I'm bored. Like, can you have Mike back on? Have Mike talk about anything. Have Mike talk about his issues he's having with his lawnmower. That'll be more interesting. I mean, and another thing I wanted to sort of clear up regarding the live events, like, because there was a comment, and it's sort of a fair comment, and it basically said, what's wrong with you, Ryan? Are you schizophrenic? You posted one video that seemed to be in support of the Unite the Right event, and then you uploaded this other video attacking it, or not attacking the idea of doing things like this. And so what's wrong with you, Brian? Aren't you schizophrenic? Well, here's sort of a bind that I was in for a while. The TRS people and the Daily Stormer people and the Traditional Worker Party people, they were doing all these live events. They had one in Pikeville. They had them in a bunch of places. They get little counter protesters. Local media would cover them. And it would be what it was. It wouldn't blow up. It wouldn't be a disaster. Local media would talk about them, but they would be largely ignored in the broader political sphere, and it wouldn't actually do any harm. Now, I had been saying for a while, and unfortunately, I don't have videos saying this. Maybe I do. I'm not sure, but I don't recall any videos of me saying this, so I'm not on public record coming out against live IRL media, like confrontational media events. So I'm not on record having said that, so I guess I'll just sort of have to take my word that in private I was saying this. But the problem is, like, if there's no disaster, it's hard for me to make the case that this is going to lead to disaster, right? Like, it's hard for me. Like, there's Hailgate, but Hailgate was a while ago, and it's several months later they're doing these events, and it sort of looks like they've learned their lesson from Hailgate, and it looks like they're able to sort of control things and keep things clamped down. So it was hard. It would be hard for me to come out and say, don't do these live events. There's not a whole lot of potential upside, and there's a gigantic potential downside. But how could I say that when it wasn't happening, right? Like, the downside just wasn't occurring. So, and then on the first night of the Unite the Right thing, it looked like it was going okay. Like, on the first night of Unite the Right, when they did the Tiki Torch rally, I didn't predict what would happen. I didn't know what was going to happen would happen. Right? I was totally surprised. I was totally blindsided. I was totally blindsided by what happened on that day. Okay, so I looked at the Tiki Torch rally, and it was like, okay. And the thing is, like, I made that video, and it was sort of I just got Premiere, Adobe Premiere, and I was sort of and I was just trying to sort of make a little aesthetic video. That was sort of what I was doing. And of course, what I said at the beginning, now nowhere in the video did I make an explicit endorsement of the event. I just said, hey, well, I didn't at the beginning. I didn't say hey anything. I just had the little music and the crying tranny, because the crying tranny's funny, but also sort of the point, which is that look at how these people react in just the moment, just a little moment, a little sliver, when it looks like they're on the ropes. Now it was a very small window. Obviously, by the next day, that wasn't the case at all. The counter protesters probably outnumbered the UTR people. I don't know; it's hard to say. But I was just saying, like, in that little sliver, we saw their psychological reaction to what it's like to live like us, literally every day. So that's all. That's the point I was making. And it wasn't an endorsement of the event, and I didn't expect that it would collapse like it did. Right now, the thing is, if I knew that night that the next day was going to be such a disaster, I obviously would not have made that video, and I would have, I would not have made that video. But see, my thought is that this event, it looked like it was going how the previous events had been going, that it wasn't going to be a disaster. Now, I'm against these events, and I was against those events when I made that video. But what's the point of me coming out against it when it looks like it's going well? Especially when it had that tiki torch rally, that looked like it was pretty good. It was organized. There wasn't like there wasn't Nazi LARPing. They were all in polo shirts. They were all well dressed, and they were all just saying, they had a good message. You will not replace us. It's like, okay, that's a decent message. I mean, I give it a C. I mean, it's not a great line, but it's okay. You don't have symbols all over the place. You don't have stupid symbols all over the place. So that's good. Okay, look. So I thought it was okay. And this is kind of aesthetic, and I'll make a little video out of this. I'm opposed to them doing this, but they're doing it, so why not make a little video? So that's sort of how I thought about this. I didn't expect that it was going to blow up, right? And that's why I made the video. And so people think I'm like schizophrenic on this. It's like, no, it's just in the early part, like at the beginning of the event, it looked like it was going how the other events were going, and I kept my mouth shut about sort of live events. At least kept my mouth shut publicly about the problems of live events, because my criticisms wouldn't have any credibility because there hadn't been a disaster since Hailgate. So that's sort of how that's sort of my defense of what looks like schizophrenia to a lot of people. Although, like, really strictly speaking, I never came out in that first video openly endorsing the event. Right? I didn't do that. So yeah, that's what I think about live events, and sort of my defense of my sort of what from looking at it from a distance looks like hypocrisy in those two videos, but it's really not hypocrisy if you understand the intricacies of my thinking. Isn't that exciting? Moving on. Yeah, I guess what I want to talk about here is having nice things. Can we have nice things? Like, because I'm looking at what Richard Spencer gets. I don't know exactly how much money Richard Spencer gets, but I have an idea. I also have an idea of how much TRS gets. I forget if this is public information or not, so I won't say exactly how much they get. Okay. But TRS gets a bunch of money. Richard Spencer gets more money. I'll say for how much money Richard Spencer gets, it's more than $250,000. Okay, we'll just say that. Now, I look at that and I think, wow, there's something that I'd like to do a lot of time. Here's just one example of a really nice thing that we could have if we had somebody more competent with that money. Real talk here. Okay. You could go to universities, not to have stupid little events, but to go in and do studies. Like, you ask a whole bunch of students there, and you don't have to pay them. Like, first off, a lot of people, they're interested in doing studies. Like, you tell them, hey, we're going to present some arguments to you. You tell us how persuasive these arguments are to you, right? And first you ask them a bunch of questions about their political beliefs. People are kind of narcissists, and so they like to tell you about their political beliefs, right? So there's, I don't think you'd have to pay them a whole lot, it's sort of interesting to them what they're doing. And so what you do is you ask them their political beliefs, and then you give them a series of arguments, right? And you do sort of A/B testing on arguments for white identity, what's persuasive, what's not, and you've asked them beforehand, do you identify as liberal? Do you identify as conservative? Do you identify as libertarian? And you can break it down more. Okay, are you a social conservative, economic conservative, and so you can figure out. And you have to do a whole bunch of these because you have to deal with like a whole bunch of different combinations. Like at each university, you may only get like 100 people, right? So you have to do a lot of these. But eventually, you start to get data and figure out what kinds of arguments work with what political ideologies. And so what you can then do is begin to develop arguments for each ideology or each sort of political tendency, right? And basically, and so I think what would end up happening is you would identify like 4 or 5 paths. Okay, you would identify, the, sort of like anti-authoritarian liberal path. The you may be even able to identify like the authoritarian liberal path. That I suspect there's probably no path for that kind of person. The sort of apolitical like the apolitical person path, and of course the libertarian and conservative path. And also I'm sure there's plenty of work to be done on the conservative path. Figure out how to make that more efficient. Figure out how to make that better. How to make that path work better. Do all this kind of A/B testing and get arguments to work. You got arguments that work, right? And then at the end of that, you would have so much more than fucking. I don't know how much Unite the Right cost, but I know it costs a bunch of money. Like I understand, there's the altright.com, there's a website. It's like, okay, cool, but like what, I don't know, what use is that site? What use is altright.com? I mean, if you're interested in if people are talking about, well, it's useful to sort of keep articles, to keep sort of the community engaged and kept. And yeah, there's a purpose for that, right? But I think the right stuff does a bang up job on that. I don't think you need anything, Now, unfortunately, I think the right stuff also causes people to be against quote unquote optics cucking. I think that's another problem, because Mike Enoch, he'll never counter signal Heimbach. He'll never counter signal the 1488ers. I think at most he'll say take down the Nazi flags, but he won't go the full measure that I think needs to be gone to deal with these people. Because fundamentally these people are supporting an anti-white. I've already explained my. So, what else? Yeah. So there's all sorts of good things that we could have, but it's let's test this stuff. Let's figure stuff out. Let's create and let's create sort of like a one-stop shop. Let's and we can hire multiple people. Like I've sort of been trying. Like Sean and I sort of been doing this stuff sort of like volunteer, sort of just. Getting the petty shekels that we've gotten, but it's like I mean I'm looking. It's just baffling to me just how much money Richard Spencer gets. And the right stuff. Okay, the right stuff. They're not. I mean they get a bunch of money and they run a decent website. So I'm not gonna. They're not so bad as Richard Spencer. But there's all this money. It's like, where's it going? It's going to nothing, right? What it reminds me of? It reminds me a lot about the fucking Mises Institute. That's what it reminds me of. It reminds me of the Mises Institute. Like, I remember seeing how much money the Mises Institute got a year. And I was like, what the hell? Are you for real? And also like a lot of think tanks get a obscene amount of money for nothing, for just what little they do. Anyway, So yeah, there's all sorts of good things we could have. People like to for example, people talk about real life activism, but like when you do real life activism, you got to be smart, right? You got to be kind of a ninja about it, the white student unions. That was good, right? Because what did that do? What did the white student union stuff do? It caused a whole bunch of people to be anti-white. And a bunch of normies saw that. What they saw was a bunch of, university people be anti-white. So that was good. That's good activism. Or there was another event where Identity Europa or some other group found some statues and found a statue of like a ancient, not ancient, but a historical German empress, right? And put her in a burqa, put the statue in a burqa, and wrote on it something about, they wrote some message underneath it about how this is, what Islam will do, or saying that this is, or saying this is how women need to be in the new caliphate or something. And yeah, they went in. It was quick. There was no announcement. There was no counter protest or anything, and it made a point. And it was a visually, it was a good visual, right? It was a gripping visual to normies to see. Look, this is your great historical figure in a burqa, because this is what Muslims want to do. Do you want this? Why is Merkel doing this to Germany? Okay, that's good activism, or the posters. The postering campaign that was done by some people. The posters that were put out on a whole bunch of universities, and the thing is, on the poster, that's great because that's a very controlled message, right? You don't have to worry about some rando coming in spurging out Sieg Heil and all over the place, right? It's a very controlled message, okay. And what you say is you say something that's sort of benign. That's sort of white people have a right to interests, white people have a right to exist, white people have and then so you have these posters with these very sort of benign messages, and then you have this just rage reaction against it, and the normies can see that. The normies look at the posters and say, this doesn't look too offensive, or saying white student, this doesn't look too offensive to me, and then they see the rage reaction, and that causes them to go, oh geez, these SJWs are monsters. And that's good. That's good effective activism. But you got to be smart about it. You can't just go out and you can't just go out. You have to have a plan and think about how the reactions are going to be. It's you got to do jujitsu, right? Because they're bigger than you. They're going to come after you. You have to be smart. You have to be quick. You can't just go out and when you go out in a big rally in a public area, you're going head on. Okay, this is it would be a convoluted analogy, because I'm thinking it would be like the Tet Offensive, but the problem is, even though the Tet Offensive was an absolute disaster for the North Vietnamese, ironically enough, U.S. media painted it as a disaster for the U.S., and that sort of led to a collapse in public support for the war, even though it was a huge victory for the U.S. Because the Tet Offensive, up to that point, the Vietnamese had been sort of fighting guerrilla-style, partisan-style warfare, because they were at material disadvantages all the time. Right? They were at a massive material disadvantage, so they couldn't really go toe-to-toe with the Americans. They had to fight sort of indirectly. The Tet Offensive was, they sort of husbanded a bunch of resources, marshaled it all into a specific area, and then launched a massive offensive in that area, sort of going toe-to-toe with the Americans. And they had early offense, as all attacks do, because when you attack, you choose the point and you have overwhelming force at a point. You always make gains in the beginning, right? And so that's what happened. The U.S. lost a few bases. Reporters started freaking out, because it's oh my God, we're losing. They're charging through. Oh God, this is collapsing. The front's collapsing. It's no, they made a little breakthrough. Okay, nothing. Breakthroughs happen all the time. It's not the end of the world. Okay, and the U.S. troops surrounded them, pocketed them, carved them up. The end. Right. I think that's probably what happened. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting that. I need to be careful about that, because the Tet Offensive is something that people can easily look up, and I'm just shooting the shit here. I haven't properly prepared this video, but that's what this Unite the Right did. It's basically bring in, let's go against our opponents at in the worst possible. It's literally everything is wrong about that. Like, first off, they didn't have proper spur control. Okay? They didn't say, okay, so you want to be in, but here's the thing. If you want to be in, you got to dress a certain way, and we're going to fucking search you. Right? We're going to look in your pockets, make sure you're not hiding any Nazi or even... Now, this is something that Richard Spencer would never sort of condone, is to prohibit Confederate paraffin imagery. But at the very least, no Nazi imagery. Okay, that would be a huge improvement. Just none of that, right? Even if they limited it just to Confederate imagery, I think that's still bad. But anyway, but they didn't do any of that. They didn't have spur control. They went out into the public, and of course they went into a college town, right? So they went into a college town where they were like guaranteed to have massive negative reaction. Okay, they were dependent upon the government. They were dependent upon the local government protecting their event, right? And they're playing into, like, and they're basically and the event, of course, was all covered by legacy media, all covered by old media, the anti-white media. Okay, I mean, it's just, like, how stupid can you be? Like they basically like it almost didn't matter, and it didn't matter. It didn't matter what Richard Spencer did there. It didn't matter what any of the people at the event did at the event. It didn't matter at all, right? Because the stage was set just at the moment they went there, right? Like, it was like, just sort of looking back on it. The problem is I didn't really think that much about it. I just thought Unite the Right, it was going to be another one of these dumb little events, kind of like Pikeville. I think there are some other ones, and it wasn't going to amount to much. It was going to come, it was going to go, and that would be it, right? And I would be like, I would be thinking, oh, good, we dodged another bullet, right? That's what I thought it would be. But I guess looking back on it, I guess I should have seen the signs. I didn't have the foresight. I have the hindsight, but I didn't have the foresight. I guess I should have saw the signs. And like, they basically are doing everything wrong. It's like the Tet Offensive, except that we don't have a. It's like the Tet Offensive in terms of, like, they're attacking the enemy at their strongest point. Using the Nazi linkage, right? How they've been able to link Nazi with white identity, play into that linkage. Confederate as well. Okay, we'll add that on. Dependent on spin from old media. Okay, just like how it's just unbelievably bad. When you think about it, and when you compare this to what, say, Identity Europa does. It's no contest. Or you compare this to the white student unions, or you compare this to the postering. Okay, it's no contest. Which has had a better effect? It's just so, and like, it's like you're a small army. You don't engage them out in the field, out in the open and stuff like that. You have to be smart. You have to be a little bit savvy, okay? You can't just go out and say, we're gonna march and take over the street and you're just gonna get blasted, right? It's like, let's take on an enemy, 100 times our size, and just square up and hit them straight up at their strongest point. Like, like, really? I mean, it's almost like what some but it's almost like what some sort of infiltrator would want you to do if they wanted you to fail, right? If they were to design an event that was going to end in disaster, like Charlottesville seems to be pretty close. Like what if? Here's Ryan's what if here. What if? Because Mike Enoch's genuine, okay? I've known Mike way back. Okay, I know he's genuine. I've sort of seen his intellectual progression at a rate of 1 day per day. Okay, so I know. I mean, if he is some sort of op, if he is either some sort of SPLC ADL or even a Fed shill, whatever, then he is like, like, because this is like a 6-year operation. I mean, this is like a deep embed that is beyond, like it would be the most amazing thing ever. I would just be absolutely stunned if so. But it seems to me that some like what if some people got to Mike, got to Sven, got to Richard, and convinced them, and these people are up to no good. Okay, they want the movement to fail. They want white identity to fail. They want it to be dragged, into Nazism, into LARPing, and into destruction, right? Charlottesville is exactly what they would want. Like Charlottesville is perfect. Mike Cernovich, who I'm not totally fond of because I kind of don't like Cernovich because of his the way he dealt with Baked Alaska and wanting to sue him. That was like really shitty. But Cernovich, he was talking about the Tiki Torch marches and he brought up something that I thought was made a little bit of sense. He was saying, hey, if you have all those tiki torches that are illuminating your faces, line up in rows. So and so you have a few opposition people taking pictures of everything, taking recordings of everything. Well, guess what? Now you have your face illuminated in rows. Chick, 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 chick. Got all those faces. And I'm thinking, you know what? I think Mike, that sounds... You might have a point, And it seems like something that somebody who's trying to socially engineer the movement to fail, right? I think what you'd want to do is you'd want to get to Mike, you'd get to Sven, you'd get to Richard Spencer, and you'd try to convince them to do. You try to convince them to do what they did. You try to convince them to never punch right. Okay. You try to convince them to stick with the Hitler regime, to try to stick with Hitlerism and all the crap of Hitlerism, and you try to convince them to sort of do stuff in the real world, right? Get out in the real world, what did it happen? Are there some people trying to socially engineer others? Or trying to socially engineer sort of the heads of the alt-right to do really bad things, to do really ineffective failure things? I don't know. Maybe. Like if that did happen, this is what you'd see. If that was the case, if there were some people doing social engineering, trying to push Mike and Richard and Sven to do really destructive things for white identity, this is what you would see. And it's like, yeah. So that's just sort of how I look at all this stuff. I said this would be the second to last video on all this stuff, and because there's another video I want to make. I don't want to really talk about what's going to be in it. It's going to be shorter. I'm not going to be talking about all these things again, but it'll be shorter and it'll be about something related to this stuff. But I'm not going to get into this stuff again. I mean, this is sort of like, I view this as sort of like, I don't want to do this a whole lot, because I don't want to focus on. I don't want to make videos about these people. I'll just say, I guess maybe I should make it clear here. I like Mike, okay, but I think Mike's been convinced and convinced himself, right? I think he's, Mike's a persuader more than he is a persuadee. Okay, he's a brainwasher more than he is a brainwashee. So when I say that he's sort of been convinced or persuaded, like a lot of that's self-persuasion. It's something I've said about Stefan Molyneux. People think like Stefan Molyneux saying all this stuff back when Stefan Molyneux was a bit more culty. They would say stuff like Stefan Molyneux's like deliberately trying to trick these people. But one thing they sort of forget is that, there's no big believer in Molyneux's philosophy than Molyneux himself, right? There were even people back in the ANCAP days, saying that, that I was running a cult of of emergentism or anarcho-capitalism or whatever. You know, if I was, I wasn't aware of it. Okay, because I was a total believer in all that stuff. Right, there was no bigger believer in the philosophy of Ryan Faulk and Fringe Elements than me. Okay, so I just sort of want to make that clear. But I think Mike, like with the no punching to the right stuff, I think like he was onto a lot of truth with that at the beginning, you know, especially when like a lot of the disavows they don't score you any points, you know, and especially when you're under the gun and when you're under like an SJW attack, don't ever admit, don't ever apologize, don't ever like there's a lot of truth to don't cuck. You don't get any points for because if you apologize, well, guess what? You've just validated all their criticisms, and they're just gonna, you know, now you're mush, and you know what? Like where there's mush, push. Okay, so if you mush, they're gonna push. So I think Mike's figured that out. But he's made a mistake in that these like Nazism is not. You know, he says don't punch right. Well, Nazism isn't right. It's just crazy. It's not right. It's not right, and it's definitely not white. Okay, so and I would also say the same thing about the Confederate stuff, but you know that's all. It's the same sort of thing, but it's not to anywhere near the degree. Okay, but so he was onto a lot of truth with the don't punch right thing at the beginning, but now he's at the point where he's not punching literally anybody who comes in and says he's on your side, right? He's not excluding, like anybody who comes in and says they're on his side, he won't exclude them, with some exception. There's Iron March people, he'll exclude some people, but like just sort of as a rule, he won't exclude you if you're on his side, unless you like really really bad, okay? And that's a standard that can be exploited, right? That sets you up for exploitation. That sets you up for being led down stupid. That sets you up for letting in a bunch of spurgs into your events, fucking you over. That's what it sets you up for. So, you know, I hope maybe take this to heart, you know. I think, you know, I guess I still have a lot of, I don't have faith in Richard Spencer. I don't have faith in him at all, because he never, you know, I don't have faith in Richard Spencer. I don't have any ideas that he's going to change or anything. I think he's in his own, he's in Spencer land in the stuff that he's off in his own little world. All his talking points are he has Richard Spencer, he's weird things, become who we are. So I don't have much faith in Spencer, right? But I do have hope for Mike. I think you know, Mike there, you know, with Mike and Sven, there's something there, but otherwise, I kind of agree with Ramsey Paul a little bit. I think Ramsey Paul is a little bit, he's kind of a Debbie Downer. Like remember during the election, he was talking about how Hillary's gonna win and it's gonna be really fucking bad. And I made videos saying, hey, the election's not quite what they say. Take a closer look at the polls. They're overweighting Democrats and stuff, you know. And of course, towards the end of the election, guess what? The polls started to behave themselves, right? You know, they started to weight properly, and basically my corrections started to have no effect towards the end. As you got closer to the election, you know, the polls tightened. Oh, imagine that! Isn't that interesting? You know, because these polls, they don't want to be caught with their pants down when it comes time to actually predict. I mean, they'll push all sorts of fake numbers, fake crap, you know, months out from the election, you know, to try to generate a bandwagon effect in favor of their candidate. But once it gets close to election time, they got to start having real results, and so they start to change, and so the polls start to converge with reality as you get closer to the election. And I saw that firsthand at a rate of like 1 day per day. I saw that happening so it's not something that I can really sort of convey to the audience, just how profound it was to see it happening like right before you. Like it's a real experience to see it happening right before you over the course of a month, to see the polls start to converge with reality. It was like, wow. and to see like and to see them start to behave themselves in terms of how they weighted Democrats and Republicans to when the party ID weighting, and then by like before the election, the polls almost got it right. Outside of the Rust Belt area, outside of the Southern Ohio Appalachia radius, which is the monster vote, which is something I talked about back then, was the mega turnout amongst the white working class in the Rust Belt. The polls did not get that, and they wouldn't get that. Okay, they wouldn't get that because the way polls work. So, but outside of that, outside of the the Rust Belt bombshell, the polls basically got it right. Once you left the Rust Belt, that's why all these sort of battleground states out west, it's like, oh, can Trump? That's why sort of Trump's overperformance in the polls, it occurred in Ohio. He won Ohio by eight something points. You know, overperformance in Michigan, overperformance in Pennsylvania, overperformance in Wisconsin. That didn't translate out west. He didn't overperform in Colorado. He didn't overperform in New Mexico, and he didn't overperform in Nevada. Right. So the polls were accurate outside of the monster vote, which is the Rust Belt boom area. So anyway, what was I forgot. I'm going off on a tangent here. Holy shit! I literally lost my train of thought. In the podcast. I remember I was talking about Ramsey Paul, talking about how Ramsey Paul's a bit of a Debbie Downer, talking about how he thinks things are really bad. I forgot what I was going to say. Okay. Well, I guess what I would say to that is Ramsey Paul's a bit of a Debbie Downer. Don't shit yourself until like it actually happens. You know, when people talking about how, there's censor the alt-right and shut us down. Well, let's see. Let's wait it out. Let's see how long this censorship push lasts. Let's see if they keep going forward, or if they run out of steam. I don't. But it sort of looks like a coordinated, like a big coordinated thing. You have all these institutions doing the hate purges and all this stuff all happening around the time of Charlottesville, and you have companies shutting down. You had GoDaddy shutting down Daily Stormer. You had all these things happening all at the same time. So it looks like some sort of grand coordinated event. It may not be that way. It may just sort of appear that way. It may be that Charlottesville, and then a massive media blast, a massive media gaslighting attack caused a whole bunch of corporations to sort of shit themselves, and they then responded to it, and so it ends up looking like a coordinated event when it's not a coordinated event. But yeah, I would I think Ramsey Paul's a bit overly pessimistic. We'll see. Don't lose it just yet. Ramsey Paul, your channel hasn't been taken down. My channel hasn't been taken down. My site's still up. Now, granted, we're sort of small fish, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm not quite as over the top as the Daily Stormer, and honestly, I'm not nearly as over the top as the Daily Showa, Daily Showa, or any of these things. And I haven't had to deal with censorship. Aside from sort of low level, banning from Facebook groups, people that don't like me. But everyone's dealt with. But yeah, I haven't had to deal with like real serious censorship for quite a while. So we'll see. Don't shit yourself on that yet. I'm still confident. I'm still confident that somehow new speech forms will emerge, and that that what I said in the previous video about the inevitability of white nationalism, so long as a political environment similar to that of folk politics of the past can be sustained. Like, I'm still confident that that's true, and that that you'll see the rise of white nationalism. There's also that video I made about the demographic white pill, 3 reasons for quote unquote the right to be optimistic about the future. Like, don't get all down about this stuff. I think it's important to get down about stuff that's sort of in your control. Okay, um, it's really sort of productive to talk about that. It's not so productive to talk to people. I mean, it may be productive to talk to normies about white demographics. Okay, because that'll get normies thinking. And it's also been known that people become more conservative when they hear about whites becoming a minority, or whites get more conservative when they hear about whites becoming a minority. So it's good. It's good to them, but it's not effective to constantly gaslight your own side on this stuff, right? And to be sort of depresso on to your own side. And it also like it's not true, things are not as bad as they seem, or as things are not so bad. I mean, they're not great. People's still getting banned. Black Pigeon Speak still got his videos, not just demonetized, but put in limited state, which means no comments or ratings. So, I mean, it's bad, but it's not the end of the world. I don't know, has Black Pigeon Speak, has he posted another video recently? And was it in the limited state thing? So, I don't know. It looks like they're not removing Black Pigeon Speaks. I don't know. So, yeah, so there's lots of, and there's lots of potential for good things to be done, but we need competent leaders. We have to not have idiots running things. We have to not have idiots. Yeah, we have to not have idiots running things. That's what we need. Because right now it's all idiots running things, and they're 1.0ing it up, doing live events and getting their asses kicked. And it's also, they've also sort of thrown away a lot of the mystique of the alt-right. Because the mystique of the alt-right was they have all these memes, they triggered all these people, these other people sort of got BTF'd out on the internet. But now, when you go out in the real world, well, guess what? All the advantages you have on the internet of anonymity, that's gone. You've just thrown those advantages away, and you're outnumbered, and you have institutions going against you, it's the worst thing you could do. And of course, and one concern I have is that, if you do, I think that a lot of damage has already been done. Like we can talk about going forward, but it's kind of like, yeah. I just talked about being positive. Now I'm being all black pilly, but it's kind of, I think, for people are responding to be saying, oh, look, it looks good that that Richard Spencer figured this stuff out after this event. It's like, why did it take this event? That's what I'm asking. It's like, why do we have people is this what it's going to take for Richard Spencer to learn things? Does Richard Spencer only learn things when there's literally is it really? So basically, we're going to have to take all these hits over and over and over again because Richard Spencer can't learn, because Richard Spencer is of a kind of person that it takes this incredible amount of damage to learn anything. I think the alt-right label is busted. I'm certainly, I was always sort of a little bit tenuous about it, because it's like, well, alt-right, well, who decides, Also, what Richard Spencer did with alt-right, he came up with the label, then dropped it, then it got popular, and then he came back and said, I'm alt-right, I coined it, and now he's in the process of destroying the label by linking it with the WN 1.0, because he can't keep his events, he can't keep the shit locked down. Okay, that's it. That's enough of this video. I have to end the video somewhere. I'll end it.